Swadika, welcome to ASEAN Talks. I'm John Narula. The controversy over asbestos emerged following news that certain forms of asbestos actually can cause serious health issues like cancer, despite the fact that asbestos are found to be pretty inexpensive and also effective insulators, which are presently installed in countless buildings around the world. Is this claim about health issue true? Today we are joined by the Chief Inspector of UK's Asbestos Watchdog, Professor John Bridle is here with us to educate us on this issue. Sawadika. Thank you so much for coming here. To begin with, Professor, tell us a bit about asbestos. What actually is asbestos?
Well, actually, asbestos is just a name. It isn't a mineral. It's a commercial name given to describe three types of asbestos that are used commercially. You've got the blue and the brown, which are iron silicates, naturally occurring, and you've got the white asbestos, which is magnesium silicate, a completely different mineral. And actually, the white asbestos, or cruciatile, represents about 90% of all the asbestos produced. In fact, to all intents and purposes today, there is only white asbestos mined. The other two have been banned because those are the two that are causing the health risks, not the white.
I see. What's the difference actually, Professor?
Well, the difference is the iron silicates are formed in natural clays, and they're like little lumps of crystal glass that when they're shattered and made into production, they're like little glass needles, and they're very good for reinforcing in cement and products, but unfortunately when they get into the lungs, they stay there, and that's what causes the problems. The white asbestos is formed in an entirely different way, and it's like silk, and when it gets into the lungs, if you do breathe it, it very readily dissolves and doesn't give the same sort of problems that the blue and the brown does. Many years ago, when white asbestos was being mined under poor hygiene, it did cause problems, but then in exactly the same way coal mining caused problems, because you just overburden the lungs with pollutants that you take in. But for many years, for the last 50 years now, white asbestos has been very strictly controlled, and it doesn't cause the diseases that it used to. And the trouble with the blue and the brown is that the diseases that they cause take up to 60 years to show. So pretty well everyone that's going to have an asbestos disease has already got it. They're not going to get it again from today because the controls are so effective. It just is no longer a health problem.
I see. But then again, in the news, we see that there is a controversy surrounding asbestos, and there have been claims that the use of chrysotile, or the so-called white asbestos that you mentioned, does actually pose a health issue, that one can get lung cancer. Is that correct?
Not actually. One of the wonderful things about asbestos is that every time the issue is raised, it is a wonderful indicator of ignorance and corruption. White asbestos doesn't cause the problems of the blue and the brown, but it's still called asbestos, and people think it's the same mineral. And there's quite a few vested interests, particularly like claims lawyers and the removal contractors, are very happy to let people think that the white asbestos has the same risk to the blue, because then you can charge a lot of money for taking it out unnecessarily. And of course the compensation lawyers in America, who are behind most of this, would like everyone to believe that white asbestos is a deadly killer, so that they can get compensation claims. And it's a very big business. It's cost the Americans something like $400 billion to the present day. And in the UK, in the last 10 years since they banned it, it's cost us about £40 billion. The vast majority of it totally unnecessary, and not a single life has been saved. But the American lawyers have become billionaires out of it.
When did this controversy emerge?
Well, in 1989 in America, the Americans banned white asbestos because it was this deadly killer. But in 1991, it became before the courts in America, the Fifth Circuit, which is the highest court in America, and they presented all the evidence to show that it was a dangerous killer. But in actual fact, the judge and the experts there threw it all out as absolutely exaggerated rubbish. And the judge actually said, as he overturned the ban, More people will die in the United States from inhaling toothpicks than they will from white asbestos.
So the courts actually overturned the ban.
Overturned the ban, yes.
And presently chrysotile is found in the United States market.
It's used in asbestos cement. Asbestos cement in its corrugated form, which is what most people would recognize, which is on the commercial buildings, farm buildings and things like that, is the most common use of it. And it's probably 85 to 90% of all asbestos today is in that form. Also in pipes that conduct our water perfectly safely without any problems at all, unless people start saying it's like blue asbestos.
I see. Now, the situation in the United Kingdom is quite interesting, as I understand that it's been banned in the UK for quite some time now, and your group, the Asbestos Watchdog, was formed in the UK. Could you please tell us more about this?
What happened in the UK, we had, when the last Labour government got into power in 1997, we suddenly became aware of a huge campaign to have white asbestos banned. I'd been in the industry for many years, and I was interviewed by one of our major papers, the Sunday Telegraph, and they were concerned that this was literally a confidence trick, a scam, you know, a fraud. And they wrote a big article about it, as I think the heading was, don't be conned by this £8 billion fraud. If only we'd have known how cheap it was. It's a lot more than that. And as a result of the article, we were contacted by, they put my email address in the article, and I was overwhelmed the next day, literally hundreds and hundreds of people frightened of what was happening. And one particular industrialist, who joined with some others, just by simply speaking to him on the telephone, we were able to tell him that he didn't have to do that, and we saved them millions of pounds just by saying, no, that doesn't need to come out, you don't need to do this with it, it's not the blue asbestos, you know. And they were so impressed with what we had done, just so simply. With the Sunday Telegraph, which was the major newspaper, we formed the Asbestos Watchdog to try and help other people. And that was formed in 2002, and we run a helpline, which I do all the time, have people writing in, my children are going to die because I parked the car in a garage with a corrugated sheet on. And we've helped, I think it's over 11,000 people. We've had cases since 2002. And they've been very pleased. We've saved them literally over £50 million just on our own. So that's how the Asbestos Watchdog started. Going back to the deaths, 4,000 deaths, they say, in the UK, 100,000 worldwide.
4,000 per year?
Per year in the United Kingdom. Well, to start with, the actual death rate, if you look at the statistics from the Industrial Injuries Board, it's only about 2,000, which I know is still a lot if you happen to be one of them. But they're all from mesothelioma, which is the asbestos-related cancer that is the worst type. You cannot get that from white asbestos. It isn't a disease you get from white asbestos. It depends entirely on the fibers being sharp enough to penetrate the lung into the lining. And white asbestos is like silk, and it won't go through, and it dissolves readily anyway.
So where's the connection?
The word asbestos. That's the only connection between the two. They are a different mineral. It's like, an easy way of saying it is that lead is poisonous, but lead is a metal. So do you ban all metals?
So this present government,
the new government,
they think differently towards asbestos.
They were in opposition. The people I'm dealing with now, when they were in opposition, tried desperately to get the white asbestos not banned, but they were ignored. But now they are in power. They are now looking at it. And I had a letter from a Secretary of State saying that he was horrified to discover that this fraud is still being, this scandal rather, is still being perpetrated. So they're sounding rather robust that they're going to look into this this effect, because in England we have, in Britain we have a situation, a law that says that if you conspire with others to mislead them for profit, that is fraud. And the evidence that I'm giving, they will be trying to decide whether a crime has been committed. If it has, the same people as IBAS that are coming here and in India are going to find they're having to defend themselves as to why they had deliberately deceived people.
Now, you mentioned India as well.
Yep.
India, this problem is emerging in India. The group and the lobbyists are traveling there.
India does have a few problems that are quite genuine. They have become a dumping ground for decommissioned ships, which does have a lot of the blue and the brown asbestos in them, and they're taken to ports and they are stripped out under very bad hygiene, and it really shouldn't be happening. And the crossetile producers, the white asbestos producers, are as anti that as everyone else is, and it's wrong and it shouldn't happen. There's also one or two small producers that use very cheap labour that don't conform to the safe use, and these people need to be sorted. But it's a very, very small point. But the anti-asbestos lobbyists take this very small point and they make it a generalisation, like the whole of India is like this. When the Canadian Prime Minister visited India recently, the press in Canada was saying this man is visiting us, bringing his export of death to India. Very emotional stuff, absolute nonsense. But they're getting very desperate now.
Now, as for in other countries, it is still widely used across the world.
Yes.
In Brazil, in Russia.
Well, there's about 2 million tons a year that's produced of crossetile, of pure crossetile, which is the only sort that is now, and that actually increased by 5% last year. So it's being used very widely, and it's a very good product. I mean, I'm not trying to sell the product, I don't make it, but it's it lasts a very long time. It gives cheap housing to people. It provides water into places where they couldn't get it. It saves thousands of lives a year, quite genuinely. Doesn't kill anybody. Now,
with being a consumer, I'm sure they must be confused, because on one hand, anti-asbestos people are saying it's not good, it's a health risk. On the other hand, we have the asbestos watchdog saying no. Then just to ask you, being a consumer, who should we all believe? Is there a place where you could find information?
Well, it would be you can try our website, but of course you're bound to think I'm biased. What I keep saying, and I'm saying to the British government now, don't just take my word for it. Let's have an informed debate. These people won't come to the debate. They won't let me talk here. They don't want to hear what our opinion is and what the other science is.
Now, about this issue, a book was written, Scared to Death.
Yeah, this was written by Christopher Booker and Richard North. It was actually the book was called Scared to Death, and it had 14 chapters in it, of which the biggest one, was asbestos. And they described asbestos as the biggest industrial fraud ever in history. And it's not, with that sort of money, $400 billion in America is just quite enough to justify that. And the authors of it gave me a number of books just of the chapter.
So it has been published and sold?
Yeah. And so it was very high in the bestsellers in the UK in November 2008, and then it was launched in America, and it did extremely well there.
We're running out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
And that was the Chief Inspector of UK's Asbestos Watchdog, Professor John Bridle, giving us some information, interesting facts rather, on the asbestos situation and the controversy surrounding it. That's all about the time we have today on ASEAN Talks. Thank you to all of you for joining us. I'm Hunny Narula. Bye for now. Sawasdee ka.